Good evening, and welcome back. I do hope you enjoyed last night's tale, because, well, there's another storm brewing and another story's itching to be told. So come, I've put another log on the fire. Get comfy and drift with me, not down the crooked lanes of England this time, but rather up the restless ribbons of the American highways. Long trails of asphalt stretching beneath the tires of 18-wheelers, truck stops glowing in neon haze, and motels rising like weary sentinels along the roadside. It is a landscape of constant motion, where men pass quietly through the night, their faces forgotten as quickly as they appear. This is the world of diesel fumes and midnight coffee, of headlights cutting through the dark, and of women who vanish into the endless sprawl of interstate miles. A world where the silence of a cab can carry both loneliness and dark, deadly secrets. So come, let the storm settle around us, and drift with me now into the shadowed miles of California's highways. For within that endless sea of drivers, one man carried a secret darker than most could ever imagine. To many, he seemed ordinary. A long-haul trucker, a former Marine, a man who had once served his country, who waved politely at neighbors, who blended into the fabric of small-town life. But beneath the surface, cracks were spreading, deep, invisible fractures in his mind that would one day shatter into violence. Wayne Ford was born in 1961 in Petaluma, California. His childhood, like many, was marked by loss and instability. A head injury in 1980 left him changed. Those who knew him spoke later of shifts in mood, sudden storms of anger, unpredictable tides within his soul. The military gave him purpose for a time, but not healing. He carried scars, invisible yet searing, into his civilian life. Wayne tried to live within the lines. Marriage, children, the steady hum of work. But his mind turned inward, restless and unstable. Diagnosed later with borderline personality disorder, he swung between tenderness and rage, remorse and cruelty. His relationships fractured beneath the weight of his volatility. Divorces piled behind him like discarded chapters. And then, sometime in the mid-1990s, those internal storms turned outward. Wayne began to walk the darker edges of society, where vulnerability lingered in the open. Prostitutes, runaways, women living on the fringes of safety. He found them, spoke gently, offered a ride, a drink, a place to rest. But beneath the surface of his invitations lurked something terrible. The first victim whose fate we know was Kerry Ann Cummings. She was 25 years old, a young mother, struggling, living in the orbit of hardship. In October of 1997, she vanished. For decades, she was known only as a Jane Doe. Her dismembered torso found near a slough in California's Humboldt County. The details are stark. Kerry was strangled, her body cut apart, her remains hidden in a watery marsh. For more than 20 years, she had no name in the records. Only in 2023 did DNA bring her back to her family, returning her humanity at last. But in 1997, Kerry's death was only the beginning, because with it, oh my, Wayne Ford had discovered something within himself. The violence he once tried to suppress now gave him a sense of power. His hands became instruments of control. Strangulation was his chosen method, intimate, deliberate, demanding that he hold life and death in his grasp until the light left their eyes. And when the act was done, he went further still. He mutilated, cut, took pieces of the women with him, trophies, tokens of his cruelty, hidden in the shadows of his truck. The world did not know his name yet, not when Kerry's torso surfaced in the reeds, not when missing women began to ripple across counties. Wayne Ford was still just another face in the crowd, a driver passing through, the man sipping coffee at the counter of a roadside diner. The waters of Humboldt County carry secrets. Cold streams carve through redwood forests, and marshlands stretch out like forgotten veins of the earth. It was here, in October of 1997, that two men, walking near a slough, made a discovery that would ripple for decades. A torso, dismembered, wrapped, concealed, discarded as though the body were not once a living, breathing woman. No name, no history, no face to attach to the fragments that remained. For more than 20 years, she was known only as a Jane Doe. But she was not nameless. She was Kerry Ann Cummings. Kerry was 25 years old. She had grown up in Southern California, a daughter, a friend, a woman with struggles, but with a life still unwritten ahead of her. She was a mother to a little girl. She laughed, she loved, she stumbled and tried again, as all of us do. But she was also vulnerable, living close to the edges where safety frays. When she crossed paths with Wayne Adam Ford, she could not have known the darkness waiting behind his quiet smile. The details of that night remain hazy, but the result was brutally clear. Wayne strangled Kerry, cutting short her breath, her voice, her chance to raise her child. Then, with chilling calculation, he dismembered her body. A torso cast aside, other parts scattered, taken. Why? That question lingered through every courtroom and every interview to come. Some said Ford wanted control. Others said he sought to shock, to horrify, perhaps even to punish the women who accepted his kindness, only to meet his rage. What is certain is this: Kerry was not the last. For Wayne Ford had crossed a threshold. Once the act was done, once he had seen that he could silence life with his own hands, there was no turning back. The power of that night, twisted and intoxicating, became a lure he could not resist. The investigation into Kerry's remains stalled. No suspect, no clear leads, and with her name unknown, there was little for the police to pursue. Life moved on in the county, but the slough still held its secret. Meanwhile, Ford returned to his life behind the wheel of a long-haul truck. He carried loads across California, Nevada, and Oregon, the roads endless before him. At diners, he sipped coffee. At truck stops, he exchanged nods with fellow drivers. To the world, he was invisible. Another man in denim and boots, passing through. But inside, the storm gathered. The following year, In 1998, his pattern would expand. Victims emerged across counties, women with names and faces, suddenly gone. Patricia Tamez, the 39-year-old mother of 3. Lanette White, only 25. Tina Gibbs, 26, with dreams of a future snatched from her. Each one strangled, their bodies left discarded, each one reduced by his hands to silence. Wayne Ford was methodical, but he was not unshakable. Guilt pressed at him, warped though it was. He confessed later that he felt haunted by what he had done. Haunted enough to walk into a sheriff's office one morning in 1998, carrying something so grotesque it seemed beyond imagining. For in his pocket, in a plastic bag, was a woman's severed breast.
The deputies stared, stunned, as he laid it on the desk before them, and with that single act, the world finally learned the name Wayne Adam Ford, the man who killed quietly on highways, the man who strangled in silence, the man who mutilated his victims and carried their pieces like tokens of his control, the man with the breast in his pocket. The morning of November 3rd, 1998 began like any other in Eureka, California, a coastal town wrapped in fog where the Pacific sighs against the shore and the streets stir slowly awake. But at the doors of the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, a man approached carrying the weight of secrets too dark to remain hidden. His name was Wayne Adam Ford, and inside the pocket of his jacket, sealed in a plastic bag, he carried the evidence of horrors the deputies inside could scarcely imagine. The man who stepped through those doors did not look like a monster. He was calm, quiet, broad-shouldered, his expression heavy with exhaustion. But what he placed before them shattered any sense of ordinary. A woman's breast, severed, wrapped, a grotesque token of violence delivered into the hands of the law. The deputies stared, their minds scrambling to process what their eyes beheld. Was this a prank? A sick joke? But the man's voice, low, steady, hollow, told them otherwise. Wayne Ford confessed. And not to a single crime. No, but to a trail of death that stretched across California. 4 women, he said, had died by his hands. 4 lives extinguished in his truck, on his routes, in the darkened spaces where no one was watching. He told them of Kerry Ann Cummings, still unidentified at that time. He told them of Patricia Tamez, strangled and left discarded, of Lanette White, of Tina Gibbs. He spoke of dismemberment, of trophies taken, of acts so brutal they froze the blood of those listening. And yet, his words came without fury, without madness. They were delivered with the resignation of a man who could no longer carry the weight of his own deeds. What drove him to that office? Perhaps it was guilt, twisted though it was. Perhaps the walls of his conscience had begun to close in. Or perhaps, as some believe, he wanted recognition, to etch his name in the annals of infamy, to be remembered not as a faceless trucker, but as something darker. Whatever his reasons, his confession transformed the unknown shadow into flesh and blood. The police had their man, and in that moment, the enormity of his crimes began to unfold. Reporters would later call him the man with the breast in his pocket, a phrase both grotesque and unforgettable, a phrase that captured the stark reality of what he had done, and the chilling casualness with which he revealed it. Ford sat in custody, still calm, still deliberate. He did not rant or rave. He did not fight or resist. He simply spoke. giving his captors a map of horrors that investigators would spend years piecing together. The courtroom would later hear these words. The families of victims would hear them too. Each syllable another wound torn open, each detail another reminder of what their daughters had endured. But on that morning in 1998, in a sheriff's office by the fog-bound coast, it was simply a man, a plastic bag, and the silence that followed his confession. A silence that spoke louder than any scream. When investigators followed the threads of Wayne Ford's confession, they found themselves staring into the abyss of his crimes. 4 women, each one unique, each one precious to those who loved them, all silenced by the same pair of hands. The first, as we have spoken, was Kerry Ann Cummings, a young mother, 25 years old, strangled and left dismembered, her torso discovered in a Humboldt County slough. For decades she was only Jane Doe. It was not until 2023 that DNA gave her back her name, allowing her daughter to finally know what became of her. But in 1997, she was simply the first to vanish into Ford's darkness. The second was Patricia Tamez, 39 years old, a mother of 3, trying to build a better life while wrestling with hardship. In the spring of 1998, she encountered Ford. Perhaps she saw him as a man offering kindness, a ride, a moment of safety. Instead, she found herself trapped in the cab of his truck, his hands closing around her throat. The act of strangulation is slow, intimate. It requires will, the conscious decision to hold until the last flicker of life fades. Ford made that choice. Patricia's body was later found, abandoned. Her children were left to grow without her, their memories of their mother forever cut short. The third victim was Lanette White, only 25 years old. She had dreams, as all young women do. Perhaps she imagined love, family, stability. Instead, she fell into the path of a predator. Again, Ford offered what seemed like kindness. Again, it ended with his hands around her throat. Lanette's life was extinguished before it had time to unfold. She became another entry in the growing catalogue of horror. The fourth was Tina Gibbs, 26 years old, full of possibility, described by those who knew her as bright and beautiful. But she too crossed paths with Wayne Ford in 1998. Her death echoed the others. Strangulation, control, the deliberate extinguishing of her life. Tina's body was later recovered, another tragic confirmation of Ford's confession. These 4 names are the ones we know, confirmed by Ford's words and the evidence recovered. But detectives whispered even then that there may have been more. Women who vanished, never found, lost along the highways where Ford drove his rig. Whether the number was 4 or more, the brutality of his acts was beyond doubt. And then came the trial. In 2006, 8 years after his chilling confession, Wayne Adam Ford stood before a jury in San Bernardino County. The courtroom was hushed, heavy with grief. Families of the victims filled the benches, their faces marked by years of unanswered questions, now brought into focus at last. The prosecution laid out the evidence with precision. The dismembered remains of Kerry Ann Cummings, the accounts of Patricia, Lanette and Tina, the plastic bag Ford had carried into the sheriff's office, the breast, the ultimate symbol of his grotesque trophies. Witness after witness testified. Experts described the method of strangulation. Forensic investigators detailed the fragments of bodies recovered, the careful work of identifying them. The jury listened. Witness after witness testified. Experts described the method of strangulation. Forensic investigators detailed the fragments of bodies recovered, the careful work of identifying them. The jury listened, shaken by the horror laid bare before them. Ford himself sat impassive. He did not rage, did not plead. He allowed the words to hang in the air, silent in the face of his own monstrosity. His defense spoke of mental illness, of borderline personality disorder, of remorse that had driven him to confess. But the jury looked not at his words, but at his deeds. And when the verdict came, it was clear. Guilty on all counts. Murder, mutilation, the taking of lives with deliberate intent. The sentence was death. Ford was sent to San Quentin State Prison to join the ranks of California's most notorious killers. There, behind iron bars and razor wire, he would live not as a trucker on endless highways, but as a condemned man awaiting execution. For the families, the verdict was both an end and a beginning. An end to uncertainty, a beginning to the long, impossible work of carrying grief through the years. Children grew up without their mothers. Parents aged without their daughters. The courtroom delivered justice, but justice is never resurrection. And yet, one truth stood unshaken. The man who once walked into a sheriff's office with a breast in his pocket would never again walk free. Since 2006, he has sat within those walls. Day after day, season after season, his existence has shrunk to iron bars, grey concrete, and the endless ticking of time. He has made no escape into denial. Ford has admitted his crimes. Some have even called him remorseful. He spoke of being haunted by what he had done. He walked into a sheriff's office and turned himself in. A choice rare among killers of his kind. But remorse does not undo the strangling hands. It does not bring back Kerry Ann, or Patricia, or Lanette, or Tina. It does not rewrite the horror of a breast carried in a pocket, laid on a desk like evidence from a nightmare. And for more than 20 years, one of his victims lay nameless. The torso in the slough, a body without identity, a mother without a name. Until June of 2023, through the patient work of DNA testing, genealogy, and persistence, the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office confirmed what Ford had confessed all those years before. The Jane Doe was Kerry Ann Cummings, a woman who laughed, who lived, who mothered. After decades, her daughter finally knew. The missing was no longer missing. Her name was spoken, and with it, the weight of silence shifted, though it did not lift. The families of the other women still live with absence. They have carried that weight through holidays, through milestones, through the endless quiet that follows a voice forever silenced. Their daughters remain 25, 39, 26, forever frozen in the age when Ford's hands ended their lives. As for Ford himself, his story is not finished. He remains alive, his death sentence suspended by California's moratorium on executions. He breathes, he eats, he waits. Time has not claimed him. The state has not claimed him. He exists in limbo. A man who once carried pieces of women in his pockets, now reduced to a number in a prison ledger. And still, questions linger. Were there more? Were there women who vanished along the highways, who lie in unmarked graves or beneath water, their names not yet known? Ford confessed to 4, but confessions are as fragile as the men who give them. There may be echoes we have not yet heard. What we know is enough. Wayne Adam Ford stripped life from women, piece by piece. He tore mothers from their children, daughters from their parents, futures from themselves. He turned highways into hunting grounds, his truck into a chamber of death. And when he could no longer bear the weight of his crimes, he carried a part of a woman in his pocket as proof. Proof that the horror was real and that he was the one who had delivered it. The image still chills. A man walking calmly into a sheriff's office, reaching into his pocket and placing a severed breast on the desk. Not screaming, not raving, just revealing. A gesture both mundane and monstrous. The kind that brands itself into memory forever. It tells us something unsettling. Evil does not always roar. Sometimes it walks on quiet feet. Sometimes it drives a truck across long highways, waving to other drivers as it passes. Sometimes it sits calmly in the waiting room, holding horrors in a bag. And though the man is locked away, the truth remains. The road is long, the night is deep, and not all who pass us in the dark are what they seem.
Thanks for listening. This has been Fireside Crime Stories, where the darkest tales are always read by Firelight. If you haven't already, subscribe, and before you drift off, toss a little fuel on the fire. Hit that like button, ring that bell, so when the shadows shift again, you'll be the first to know that another fire's burning and another story's being told. Until next time, rest well.